Her alpha man slapped me in front of my wife and kids and called himself the new man of the house. 5 minutes later, the paramedics struggled to keep him alive while I break his hands? Life was supposed to be steady by now. After 12 years of marriage, I thought Vanessa and I had found our rhythm. We weren't the flashy couple who traveled the world or threw extravagant parties, but we had something solid, or so I believed. Our life revolved around our 2 kids, Liam and Chloe, and the small routines that came with raising a family. Weeknight dinners, weekend soccer games, and quiet nights on the couch watching old movies had defined our lives for years. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. I always thought Vanessa and I were a team. She'd been my rock during the ups and downs of my career, and I tried to be hers as she advanced in her field. Recently, she'd been promoted, which came with a heavier workload and new colleagues. She often mentioned one in particular, Derek. At first, I didn't think much of it. Vanessa talked about Derek as if he were just another coworker. Derek said this in the meeting, or Derek had a great idea for the project. But as the weeks went by, his name became a fixture in nearly every conversation. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was nothing. Vanessa had always been loyal, and I had no reason to think otherwise. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that Derek was becoming more than just a name in her stories. The way she spoke about him with a hint of admiration, a sparkle in her eye made my chest tighten. I told myself I was being paranoid. After all, she was my wife. She loved me, didn't she? But the changes in her were hard to ignore. Vanessa started spending more time at work, coming home late with vague excuses about project deadlines and team dinners. When she was home, she was distant, her attention fixed on her phone or her laptop. I'd ask about her day, but her answers were clipped, almost rehearsed. Conversations became arguments, and arguments turned into silence. I felt like I was living with a stranger. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, Chloe asked if Mommy would be home early the next day to watch her school play. Vanessa hesitated, glancing at her phone before responding. "I'll try, sweetie, but I can't promise. I have a late meeting with Derek." Liam groaned, rolling his eyes. "You're always working, Mom. Can't Derek handle it for once?" Vanessa shot him a sharp look. "Liam, that's enough." I stayed quiet, but the comment lingered in my mind. Even the kids were noticing her absence. That night, as we lay in bed, I decided to bring it up. "You've been spending a lot of time at work lately," I said carefully, not wanting to start another fight. Vanessa sighed, not looking up from her phone. "It's just a busy time, Daniel. You know how it is." "Yeah, I do," I replied, my voice firmer now. "But it feels like you're prioritizing work over us, over the kids." She finally looked at me, her expression tired and irritated. "What do you want me to do, Daniel? Quit my job? Derek and I are leading a major project. I can't just walk away." I swallowed the lump in my throat, deciding not to push further. But the tension between us was palpable, and I couldn't shake the feeling that our family was beginning to fracture. As the days turned into weeks, the cracks in our marriage widened. Vanessa became more irritable, snapping at me over the smallest things. I'd ask about her day and she'd roll her eyes, muttering, "Do we have to do this every night?" She seemed to avoid being home as much as possible, and when she was, it felt like her mind was elsewhere. I found myself retreating emotionally, unsure of how to reach her. The love and laughter that had once defined our relationship were replaced by arguments and silence. I began to dread coming home, knowing that our conversations would either end in a fight or a cold, dismissive shrug. I tried to focus on the kids, making sure they felt supported and loved despite the growing tension between their parents. Liam and Chloe deserved stability, even if Vanessa and I were struggling to provide it. But every time I saw the confusion in their eyes or heard them ask why Mommy wasn't home, my heart broke a little more. One evening, as Vanessa worked late in her home office, I stood in the doorway and watched her for a moment. She didn't notice me, too engrossed in whatever was on her laptop. I wanted to tell her how I felt, to ask her why she seemed so distant, but the words caught in my throat. I didn't know if I could handle her brushing me off again. Instead, I turned and walked away, retreating to the couch where I spent most nights alone. As I stared at the blank TV screen, I couldn't help but wonder if our marriage had reached a point of no return. The family I had worked so hard to build was slipping through my fingers, and I felt powerless to stop it. The distance between Vanessa and me grew wider with each passing day. It wasn't just her late nights or the constant talk about Derek anymore. It was her entire demeanor. She seemed more dismissive, almost annoyed by my presence. The warmth and familiarity that had once defined our relationship felt like a distant memory. One evening, as I cleared the dinner table, Vanessa leaned against the counter scrolling through her phone. I couldn't help but notice her laughing softly at something on the screen. "What's so funny?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Oh, just something Derek sent," she replied without looking up. "He's hilarious." Her words hung in the air, sharp and cutting in a way she didn't seem to notice. I forced a smile and turned back to the dishes, but inside, something cracked. It wasn't jealousy, not exactly. It was the realization that someone else was occupying the space in her life where I used to be. As the weeks went on, Derek's name became a fixture in our home. Every conversation seemed to circle back to him. "Derek thinks this," or "Derek said that." It was as if he had become a constant presence, even when he wasn't there. I tried to tell myself it was just a work thing, that their connection was purely professional, but my gut told me otherwise. The first real blow came at a work event Vanessa insisted I attend with her. I wasn't thrilled about the idea. I'd never been one for corporate parties, but I thought it might be a chance to spend time with her, to reconnect in some small way. Instead, it felt like I was crashing someone else's date. From the moment we arrived, Derek was everywhere. He greeted Vanessa with a familiarity that made my stomach churn, his hand lingering on her back just a little too long. They laughed and talked as if they were the only two people in the room, leaving me to awkwardly sip my drink and make small talk with strangers. At one point, I caught Derek whispering something in Vanessa's ear. She laughed, leaning into him, her hand lightly brushing his arm. My chest tightened as I watched the scene unfold. The two of them so engrossed in each other that they didn't even notice me standing a few feet away. I waited until we were alone to bring it up. "What's going on with you and Derek?" I asked, my tone sharper than I intended. Vanessa rolled her eyes, clearly irritated. "Nothing, Daniel. He's just a coworker." "A coworker who whispers in your ear and makes you laugh like that?" I shot back. "It doesn't look like nothing." She crossed her arms, her expression hardening. "You're being ridiculous. This is why I didn't want you to come tonight. You always overreact." Her words stung, but what hurt more was the way she dismissed my feelings so easily. I wanted to fight back to make her see how her actions were affecting me, but I knew it would only escalate into another argument. So I let it go for the moment. That night, as we drove home, the tension between us was palpable. Vanessa was glued to her phone, texting someone with a faint smile on her lips. I didn't have to ask who it was. "Vanessa," I said, breaking the silence. "I need you to hear me out." She sighed, setting her phone down but not looking at me. "What now, Daniel?" "I don't like the way Derek interacts with you," I said, keeping my voice steady. "It's disrespectful to me, to our marriage." She finally turned to face me, her expression a mix of annoyance and disbelief. "You're jealous," she said flatly. "That's what this is about. You're insecure, and you're projecting it onto me." Her words cut deeper than she realized. I wasn't insecure. I was hurt. Hurt by the growing distance between us. By the way she seemed to prioritize Derek over our family. By the way she made me feel like I didn't matter anymore. "I'm not jealous," I said quietly. "I'm trying to protect what we have." She laughed bitterly, shaking her head. "Maybe you should focus on fixing yourself instead of trying to control me." The conversation ended there with both of us retreating into silence. I stared out the window, my mind racing with thoughts I didn't know how to articulate. How had we gotten here? How had the woman I once considered my partner become someone I barely recognized? Over the next few days, I tried to keep my distance, hoping the space would ease the tension, but it didn't. Vanessa continued to bring up Derek in casual conversation, her tone light and carefree as if nothing had changed. I couldn't tell if she was oblivious to the damage she was causing or if she just didn't care. One evening, as we sat in the living room, I noticed her phone light up with a text. She glanced at the screen, smiled, and quickly replied before setting it face down on the table. My heart sank. I didn't need to see the name to know who it was. "Vanessa," I said, my voice breaking the silence. "Do you even want to fix this?" She looked at me, her eyes narrowing. "Fix what?" "Us," I said simply. "Our marriage." She hesitated for a moment before shrugging. "I don't know, Daniel. Maybe I'm just tired of feeling like I have to babysit your insecurities." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stared at her, searching for some sign of the woman I had loved for over a decade, but she wasn't there. Vanessa was slipping away, and I didn't know how to stop her. That night, as I lay awake in bed, I realized something painful but undeniable. I couldn't save our marriage on my own. If Vanessa wasn't willing to fight for us, then maybe it was already over. Vanessa's distant behavior wasn't just affecting me anymore. It was starting to affect the kids. Liam and Chloe were sharp, perceptive, and they could sense the growing tension in the house. They asked fewer questions about their mom's late nights and stayed out of her way when she was home, but I could see the confusion and hurt in their eyes. It broke my heart. They deserved better than this version of our family. And then there was Derek. He wasn't just a name in conversations or a shadowy figure in Vanessa's stories anymore. He was a physical presence in our lives. He started showing up at the house, ostensibly to help Vanessa with work. At first, I tolerated it, reasoning that maybe he was just a coworker trying to assist her with her busy schedule. But it didn't take long for his visits to cross the line. Derek was loud, arrogant, and far too comfortable in my home. He would saunter in, cracking jokes as if he were the head of the household, and Vanessa would laugh at his every word. It was like I was invisible. Even worse, he started engaging with Liam and Chloe in a way that felt performative, like he was trying to ingratiate himself into their lives. Chloe, ever the polite one, would smile and nod, but Liam wasn't as easily charmed. He would glare at Derek, his lips pressed into a thin line, and retreat to his room whenever Derek showed up. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table helping Chloe with her homework, Derek arrived unannounced. He walked in with a box of takeout, grinning as if he owned the place. "Thought I'd bring dinner for everyone," he announced, setting the box down on the counter. I looked up, my jaw tightening. "We've already eaten," I said flatly. Vanessa breezed into the room, brushing past me to grab plates from the cabinet. "Well, I haven't," she said, her tone dismissive. "Thanks, Derek. You didn't have to do that." "Anything for you," Derek replied, winking at her. My grip on the pencil in my hand tightened, but I forced myself to stay calm. Chloe glanced between the three of us. Her small face clouded with confusion. "I'll finish this in my room, Dad," she whispered before slipping away. Later that evening, Derek lingered in the living room long after I thought he should have left. Liam came downstairs for a glass of water and froze in the doorway, watching as Derek leaned back on the couch, his arm draped casually over the backrest near Vanessa. The sight of it made my blood boil. "Derek," I said, standing up and walking into the room. "It's getting late. Don't you have somewhere else to be?" Derek smirked, not bothering to move. "Relax, Daniel. We're just going over some work stuff." "I think you've done enough work for one night," I said, my voice firm. "It's time to go." Vanessa rolled her eyes, setting her laptop aside. "Daniel, stop being so dramatic. He's just helping me with the presentation for tomorrow. Then he can help you from his own home," I snapped. "This isn't a co-working space." Derek finally stood, but not before leaning in close and saying something to Vanessa that I couldn't hear. She laughed softly, brushing her hair behind her ear. My fists clenched at my sides, but I held my ground as he made his way to the door. Just as he reached the threshold, Derek turned back, a smug grin on his face. "Good night, Vanessa. Always a pleasure. Oh, and Daniel, lighten up, will you?" And then, he did something I couldn't believe. He stepped back into the room, slapped me hard across the face and said, "You're not the man of the house anymore. That's my job." The room went silent. Liam, who had been watching from the staircase, gasped audibly. Chloe peeked out from the hallway, her eyes wide with fear. Vanessa stood frozen, her expression unreadable. My face burned, not just from the slap, but from the humiliation. This man had disrespected me in my own home, in front of my family, and Vanessa said nothing. I stared at Derek, my vision blurring with rage. Every insult, every condescending remark, every smirk flashed through my mind. He had crossed a line, and I wasn't going to stand for it. "Get out," I said. My voice low and dangerous. He smirked again. "Or what? You'll call the cops? Go ahead, tough guy." That was it. I didn't think. I just acted. Grabbing him by the collar, I slammed him against the wall. Years of pent-up anger and humiliation came rushing out as I held him there. My face inches from his. "You don't get to come into my house and disrespect me," I growled. "Not ever." Vanessa gasped, rushing forward. "Daniel, stop." But I didn't stop. Not yet. Derek had brought this on himself, and I wasn't about to let him walk away without understanding the consequences of his actions. Time seemed to slow as I held Derek against the wall. His arrogant smirk finally replaced with a flash of panic. My fingers gripped his collar tightly, and I could feel his chest rising and falling under the pressure of my hold. Every ounce of frustration, humiliation, and anger that had built up over the past few months surged through me in that moment. "You've disrespected me for the last time," I growled. My voice low and dangerous. "In my house? In front of my kids? Not anymore." Derek's hands came up defensively, but I tightened my grip, refusing to back down. "Relax, man," he choked out, his tone no longer dripping with confidence. "It was just a joke." "A joke?" I barked, slamming him harder against the wall. "You think slapping me in front of my family is a joke? You think walking into my home like you own the place is funny? Let me show you how I deal with jokes." Vanessa stood a few feet away, frozen in place. "Daniel, stop," she screamed, her voice shrill with panic. "You're overreacting." Her words only fueled my anger. Overreacting? I had stood by for months as she let this man invade our lives, humiliate me, and disrespect our marriage. And now she was defending him? I turned my head slightly to look at her. My grip on Derek never loosening. "You think this is overreacting?" I said, my voice trembling with fury. "You've been letting this man walk all over me, over us, and I'm the one overreacting?" Liam and Chloe stood at the base of the staircase, their eyes wide with fear. My heart broke seeing them like that, but I knew I had to finish this. Derek needed to learn that actions had consequences, and I needed to show my kids that I wouldn't let anyone, not even their mother's so-called coworker, disrespect me. Derek squirmed, trying to break free, but I shoved him back again. My face inches from his. "You want to play alpha in my house? Let's see how well you handle it." He finally managed to mutter. Okay. I get it. Let me go." I released him abruptly, and he stumbled forward, coughing and clutching his collar. Before he could regain his composure, I pointed to the door. "Get out," I spat. "And if you ever come near my family again, I won't be this polite." Derek glared at me, his bravado returning slightly as he adjusted his shirt. "You're crazy, man," he muttered. No wonder Vanessa's been. I took a step toward him, and he immediately shut his mouth. Without another word, he turned and walked out the door, slamming it behind him. The sound echoed through the house, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. I turned to Vanessa, who was staring at me with a mix of anger and disbelief. "What the hell was that?" she demanded. "You can't just attack people like that, Daniel." My chest heaved as I tried to calm my breathing. "Attack people?" I said, my voice still trembling with rage. "He slapped me, Vanessa, in front of you, in front of our kids, and you just stood there." He was joking, she shot back, her arms crossed defensively. "You took it way too far." "Too far," I repeated, shaking my head in disbelief. "Vanessa, he has been disrespecting me, disrespecting our marriage for months, and you let him. You encouraged it." Her face softened for a moment, but then she quickly hardened her expression. "You've been paranoid since the beginning. This is on you, not me." I stared at her, my heart sinking. This wasn't just about Derek anymore. This was about us. About a marriage that had been eroding for months, piece by piece. "If you can't see what's wrong with what just happened," I said quietly, "then I don't think there's anything left to save." Vanessa opened her mouth to respond, but I held up a hand. "Don't," I said firmly. "I've had enough. I can't do this anymore." Without waiting for her response, I turned and walked upstairs to check on Liam and Chloe. They were in Chloe's room, huddled together on her bed. Liam looked up as I entered. His eyes filled with questions he didn't know how to ask. "Are you okay?" I asked gently, sitting down beside them. Liam nodded slowly. "Is Derek gone?" "Yes," I said firmly. "He's not coming back." Chloe leaned against me, her small frame trembling. "Daddy, are you and Mommy okay?" she whispered. I swallowed hard, struggling to find the right words. "Things are complicated right now," I said honestly. "But I promise you, no matter what happens, I'll always be here for you. Both of you." They nodded, and I stayed with them until they fell asleep, their breathing steady and calm. As I watched them, a sense of clarity washed over me. I couldn't let them grow up in a home filled with tension and disrespect. They deserved better, and so did I. When I finally went back downstairs, Vanessa was waiting for me. "We need to talk," she said, her tone softer now. "No. We don't," I replied, my voice resolute. "We're past talking, Vanessa. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine." Her eyes widened, but I didn't stay to hear her response. I walked past her, grabbed my keys, and left the house. It was time to take back control of my life. I spent the night driving aimlessly, the silence of the car the only thing keeping me grounded. My mind was a storm, replaying every moment of the evening. Derek's smirk, his audacity, and the look on Vanessa's face when she defended him over me. The betrayal was raw, an open wound that refused to stop bleeding. I pulled into a motel parking lot as the first rays of dawn painted the sky. Exhausted but too restless to sleep, I checked in and collapsed onto the stiff mattress. For hours, I stared at the ceiling. My thoughts a jumble of anger, sadness, and a creeping realization. I couldn't keep living like this. Vanessa had made her choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. The next morning, I called a lawyer. The decision felt heavy, like admitting defeat. But I knew it was the right one. I explained the situation as calmly as I could, detailing the months of tension, Derek's intrusion into our lives, and Vanessa's refusal to see the damage she was causing. My lawyer listened patiently, offering reassurance that I was taking the right steps to protect myself and my children. First things first, she said. We need to secure your finances. If Vanessa has been influenced by this man, there's no telling what she might do next. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me over the phone. I'll handle it. I spent the rest of the day taking back control of my life. I froze our joint accounts, ensuring Vanessa couldn't access my hard-earned savings. I changed the locks on the house, leaving a note on the door explaining that she could contact me through my lawyer if she needed anything. It felt cold. But after everything that had happened, I couldn't afford to be soft. When I returned to the house later that evening, it felt strange walking into what used to be our shared home. The silence was deafening. The emptiness a stark contrast to the chaos that had filled it just 24 hours ago. Liam and Chloe were staying with my sister for the night. A temporary arrangement until I could figure out the next steps. I missed them already. Their laughter. Their presence. The way they brought life into every corner of the house. As I sat in the quiet living room, Vanessa's absence felt like both a loss and a relief. Part of me mourned the woman she used to be, the partner I thought I could rely on. But another part of me was grateful for the space to breathe, to think clearly without the constant tension hanging over my head. The peace didn't last long. Around 9 p.m., my phone buzzed with a message from Vanessa. We need to talk. You can't just lock me out of the house like this. I stared at the screen, my jaw tightening. Her audacity knew no bounds. After everything she had done, she still believed she had the upper hand. I typed out a short response and hit send. Talk to my lawyer. Seconds later, the phone rang. Her name flashed on the screen, but I let it go to voicemail. I couldn't deal with her manipulation anymore. This wasn't about her feelings or her attempts to justify her actions. It was about protecting myself and my kids. The next morning, I met with my lawyer to officially file for divorce. The words felt foreign as they left my mouth, like I was speaking about someone else's life. But the reality of the situation was undeniable. Vanessa had crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed, and there was no coming back from that. She'll likely contest custody, my lawyer warned. Are you prepared for that? I nodded. She's free to try, but I'll do whatever it takes to keep my kids safe. She's the one who brought chaos into their lives, not me. Over the next few weeks, I focused on creating stability for Liam and Chloe. I moved their belongings into my sister's spare room, ensuring they had everything they needed to feel at home. I kept my explanation simple, avoiding details that would confuse or upset them. Mom and Dad are taking some time apart, I said gently. But I'm here, and I always will be. They adjusted surprisingly well, their resilience a testament to their strength. Liam started opening up more, asking questions about the future and expressing his relief that Derek was no longer in the picture. Chloe, ever the optimist, focused on the small joys, movie nights with her cousins, bedtime stories from me, and the promise of weekend trips to the park. Vanessa, meanwhile, continued her campaign of deflection and blame. She sent message after message, accusing me of being controlling, paranoid, and unreasonable. Each one went unanswered. I had no interest in engaging with her. My lawyer assured me that my silence was the best course of action, and I trusted her judgment. Then, one evening, Vanessa showed up at the house unannounced. I heard the banging on the door before I saw her through the peephole. Her face flushed with anger. Daniel, open the door. She shouted. You can't just cut me out like this. I didn't respond. I stood silently behind the door, watching as she pounded on it again. Eventually, she stopped, stepping back with a frustrated sigh. You think you've won, she muttered, her voice quieter now, but you'll see. This isn't over. As she walked away, I felt a strange mix of emotions, anger, sadness, and a flicker of hope. Maybe this wasn't over, but I was ready to face whatever came next. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my life, and I wasn't going to let Vanessa or anyone else take that away from me. The morning after Vanessa's dramatic attempt to show up at the house, I knew I had to move quickly. I couldn't afford to let her unpredictable behavior interfere with the stability I was working so hard to create for Liam and Chloe. I reached out to my lawyer again to solidify my plans. If Vanessa wanted to contest custody, I was ready to fight for what was best for my kids. Sitting in my lawyer's office, I laid out everything. The toxic influence Derek had on our home, Vanessa's unwillingness to set boundaries, and how their relationship had created a hostile environment for the children. My lawyer listened intently, her pen moving steadily across her notepad. Daniel, she said, looking up at me, you have a strong case for full custody, but we need to be strategic. Document everything, every interaction, every message. The more evidence we have, the better. I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and determination. "I'll do whatever it takes," I said firmly. "I just want my kids to have a stable, healthy environment." That same day, I took steps to ensure my financial security was airtight. The accounts were already frozen, but I went a step further, closing joint credit cards, rerouting direct deposits, and ensuring Vanessa had no access to my funds. It wasn't about revenge. It was about protecting myself and my children from any reckless decisions she might make. Vanessa had shown time and again that her priorities were no longer aligned with mine or our families. When I returned home that evening, the house felt strangely quiet. Liam and Chloe were still staying with my sister, and the absence of their laughter and energy left a void that made the space feel hollow. I decided to distract myself by sorting through the clutter that had accumulated over the years. Old photo albums, forgotten toys, and stacks of papers that told the story of a life that now felt so distant. As I sifted through the memories, I came across a photo of Vanessa and me from our early days of marriage. We were smiling, carefree, and full of hope for the future. I stared at the picture for a long time, searching for some clue as to where things had gone wrong. But the answers weren't in the past. They were in the choices we'd made along the way. The cracks we'd ignored until they became too wide to bridge. My phone buzzed, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was a message from Vanessa, the latest in a string of attempts to get my attention. "You're being unfair, Daniel. You can't just shut me out like this. We need to talk about what's best for the kids." I resisted the urge to respond, instead forwarding the message to my lawyer as part of the documentation process. Vanessa's idea of what's best for the kids had been clouded by her own selfish decisions for far too long. I wasn't going to let her manipulate the situation any further. The next day, I met with a family therapist to discuss how to navigate the transition for Liam and Chloe. The therapist was kind and understanding, offering practical advice on how to support the kids through the changes. "They need consistency and reassurance," she said. "Make sure they know they're loved and that this isn't their fault." Her words stayed with me as I picked up Liam and Chloe from my sister's house that evening. They ran to me, their faces lighting up as they hugged me tightly. "Dad, can we have pizza for dinner?" Liam asked, his voice hopeful. "Of course," I said, ruffling his hair. "Anything for you too." Over dinner, we talked about their day and made plans for the weekend. It felt good to see them smile, to know that despite everything, they were finding moments of happiness. I was determined to give them the stability they deserved, no matter how hard the road ahead might be. Vanessa, meanwhile, continued her attempts to undermine me. She sent messages through mutual friends, painting me as controlling and unreasonable. One evening, a mutual friend called me, trying to mediate. "Daniel, don't you think you're being a little harsh?" they asked. "Vanessa's struggling too. Maybe you should try to work things out for the kids' sake?" I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "I appreciate your concern," I said, "but this isn't about being harsh. It's about protecting my kids from a situation that's not healthy. Vanessa made her choices, and now I'm making mine." The friend didn't have much to say after that, and I hung up feeling both drained and resolute. It was exhausting to keep defending my actions, but I knew I was doing the right thing. In the weeks that followed, I focused on creating a sense of normalcy for Liam and Chloe. We established new routines, homework at the kitchen table, movie nights on Fridays, and trips to the park on weekends. Slowly but surely, the house began to feel like a home again. Vanessa's messages grew less frequent, though the few I did receive were laced with bitterness. It was clear she wasn't used to losing control, and she didn't know how to handle it. But I didn't let her anger deter me. My priority was my kids, and I wasn't going to let anything distract me from that. One evening, as I tucked Liam and Chloe into bed, Chloe looked up at me with her big, innocent eyes. "Dad," she said softly, "are we going to be okay?" I smiled, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "We're going to be more than okay," I said. "I promise." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. The weeks that followed were some of the most transformative of my life. With the legal battles underway and Vanessa largely out of the picture, I turned my focus inward. For the first time in years, I prioritized myself, not just as a father, but as a man who deserved more than the chaos Vanessa had brought into my life. My days started early. I'd wake up before the kids, take a quiet moment to sip my coffee, and plan out the day. Then I'd get them ready for school, packing lunches and making sure Liam had his soccer gear and Chloe had her favorite book for reading time. Dropping them off at school became a ritual, a reminder of why I was fighting so hard to create a stable life. They were my reason for everything. Once the kids were at school, I threw myself into work. The projects I'd been juggling were finally taking shape, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was in control. I expanded my network, reaching out to former colleagues and exploring opportunities one hadn't considered before. Slowly but surely, I rebuilt the professional confidence Vanessa's constant belittling had eroded. But it wasn't just work that changed. I started taking better care of myself physically, too. I joined a local gym and began working out regularly. A decision inspired by both my frustration and a desire to channel my energy into something productive. The physical changes came quickly, but it was the mental clarity that made the biggest difference. With every workout, I felt stronger, not just in my body, but in my resolve. The kids noticed the changes too. "Dad, you look happier," Chloe said one night as we sat on the couch watching a movie. Her words caught me off guard, and I had to blink back tears. "Thanks, sweetie," I said, pulling her close. "That means a lot." Liam, who had been quieter since everything happened, started opening up more. One night, as I was tucking him in, he asked, "Do you think Mom will come back?" I paused, sitting on the edge of his bed. "Liam, your mom will always be a part of your life, but things are different now," I said gently. "What matters is that you and Chloe are safe and happy, and I'll do everything I can to make sure of that." He nodded, seeming to understand in a way that surprised me. "I like it better here now," he said quietly. "It feels peaceful." His words stayed with me long after he fell asleep. They were a reminder that the choices I was making, however difficult, were the right ones. My kids needed peace, and I was determined to give it to them. As the weeks turned into months, Vanessa's presence in our lives diminished. Her messages became less frequent, and the few times she reached out, it was clear she was struggling. She had underestimated just how much of her life had been tied to mine, financially, emotionally, and even socially. Without the support system I had built, she was adrift, and it showed. Meanwhile, I began to feel like myself again. Or perhaps a new, stronger version of myself. I reconnected with old friends, people I hadn't seen in years because I'd been too caught up in the whirlwind of my marriage. One of those friends introduced me to Sophia. Sophia was unlike anyone I'd ever met. She was kind and warm, but also fiercely independent and confident. We met for coffee one afternoon, and what was supposed to be a quick chat turned into hours of conversation. She listened without judgment as I talked about the struggles of the past year. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly heard. "Sounds like you've been through a lot," she said, her eyes thoughtful. "But the fact that you're here, moving forward, says a lot about your strength." Her words hit me harder than I expected. "It hasn't been easy," I admitted, "but I'm trying." "Well," she said with a small smile, "trying is more than most people do." Over the next few weeks, Sophia and I grew closer. She wasn't just a breath of fresh air, she was a reminder that love didn't have to be complicated or painful. She met Liam and Chloe, and they adored her instantly. Chloe would climb into her lap during movie nights, and Liam would excitedly show her his latest soccer moves. Seeing her with my kids felt natural, like she was meant to be a part of our lives. Vanessa, of course, didn't take kindly to hearing about Sophia. One evening, she sent me a long, angry message accusing me of moving on too quickly and replacing her in the kids' lives. I didn't respond. Her bitterness was her burden to carry, not mine. Sophia, for her part, handled the situation with grace. "She's hurting," she said when I told her about the message. "That doesn't excuse what she's done, but it explains why she's lashing out. Just keep focusing on the kids and your future. That's what matters." She was right. My focus was no longer on the past or the mistakes Vanessa had made. My focus was on the life I was building, a life filled with love, stability, and hope. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was moving forward, leaving the pain and chaos behind. The legal proceedings against Derek began unfolding just as my life started to stabilize. It started with a simple but telling revelation. Derek had been stealing from his company for years, embezzling funds to support his lifestyle of flashy cars, expensive suits, and the lavish dinners he had used to charm people like Vanessa. A part of me wasn't surprised. Men like Derek often hid behind arrogance to cover up their insecurities and lack of integrity. It wasn't hard to connect the dots once the investigation began. The authorities uncovered a trail of financial misconduct that stretched back years. It turned out he had also harassed several colleagues, manipulating them into silence with threats and promises. His confidence wasn't just arrogance. It was the false bravado of a man who had spent years skating on thin ice. What shocked me most, however, was how deeply Vanessa had been tied to it all. While she wasn't directly involved in the embezzlement, her name appeared in enough documents to raise eyebrows. Lavish dinners billed to the company, gifts that had been written off as expenses, and frequent charges from luxury spas and boutiques, all linked to Derek's corporate credit card and benefiting Vanessa. My lawyer kept me informed throughout the process, and I provided everything I could to assist. I wanted to make sure the truth came out, not just for justice, but to protect Liam and Chloe from being dragged into any more chaos. If Vanessa thought Derek was her ticket to happiness, she was about to learn just how wrong she'd been. The day Derek was arrested was surreal. I wasn't there to witness it, but I heard about it through mutual contacts. He was at his office, still smug and untouchable, when the police arrived. They escorted him out in handcuffs, and the image of his arrest quickly circulated online. Seeing his name and photo attached to headlines like "Corporate Scandal, Executive Arrested for Fraud," brought an odd sense of closure. The man who had tried to humiliate me, who had invaded my home and disrespected my family, was finally facing the consequences of his actions. Vanessa's response to the news was almost predictable. At first, she tried to play the victim, insisting she had no idea what Derek had been doing. "I thought he was just successful," she said in a voicemail she left me. "I didn't know he was a fraud." I didn't bother responding. Her claims of innocence might have held more weight if she hadn't so willingly participated in the perks of Derek's schemes. She had chosen to align herself with him, and now she was facing the fallout. It didn't take long for the consequences to catch up with her. She lost her job. Her employer didn't want to risk their reputation by being associated with someone tied to such a scandal. Friends who had once admired her lifestyle distanced themselves, and she found herself isolated, scrambling to pick up the pieces of a life she had helped destroy. One evening, as I was finishing dinner with Liam and Chloe, my phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. "I need to talk to you. Please, Daniel, just give me 5 minutes." I stared at the message for a long moment before deleting it. I had nothing left to say to her. She had made her choices, and now she was dealing with the consequences. My priority was my children, and I wasn't going to let her drama disrupt the peace we had worked so hard to create. Chloe noticed the change in my expression and tilted her head curiously. "Everything okay, Dad?" I smiled, reaching over to ruffle her hair. "Everything's just fine, sweetheart." The truth was, everything really was fine. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of control and clarity. The chaos that had defined my life with Vanessa was gone, replaced by a calm, steady rhythm. Liam and Chloe were thriving in the stable environment we built, and I was more focused than ever on providing them with the love and support they deserved. Sophia was a big part of that stability. She was patient and understanding, never pushing but always present. She helped with the kids, offered advice when I needed it, and reminded me that I didn't have to face everything alone. Her presence was a constant source of comfort and strength. As Derek's trial approached, I found myself reflecting on how far I had come. The man I had been when Vanessa and Derek tried to tear me down was almost unrecognizable. Back then, I had felt weak, defeated, and uncertain of my place in the world. Now, I was stronger, more confident, and deeply rooted in the life I was rebuilding. When Derek was finally sentenced, several years in prison for fraud and embezzlement, it felt like the last chapter of a painful story had been written. Vanessa's attempts to reach out grew less frequent, and eventually, they stopped altogether. She had become a ghost, a distant memory of a life I had left behind. One night, as I sat on the porch with Sophia, watching the stars with a glass of wine in hand, she turned to me and smiled. "You did it, Daniel," she said softly. "You fought for your kids, for yourself, and you won." I looked at her, my heart full of gratitude and love. "I didn't do it alone," I said. "You've been my anchor through all of this." She leaned against me, her warmth a reminder of everything good that had come from the ashes of my past. "This is just the beginning," she whispered. "The best is yet to come." For the first time, I truly believed her. Months after Derek's arrest and Vanessa's descent into obscurity, life began to feel normal again, or perhaps better than normal. The chaos and betrayal that had once defined my days were now distant memories, replaced by a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. Liam and Chloe had adjusted beautifully, and our home was filled with laughter and light. One Saturday morning, I sat at the breakfast table with them, sipping coffee while Chloe worked on an art project and Liam doodled in his notebook. It was a quiet, unremarkable moment, but it was exactly what I had been fighting for. A stable, happy environment where my kids could thrive. "Dad," Liam said suddenly, looking up from his notebook, "do you think we'll ever see Mom again?" The question caught me off guard. Vanessa's absence had been a source of relief for me, but I knew the kids still missed her, even after everything. I set my coffee down and met his gaze. "I don't know, buddy," I said honestly. "But what I do know is that you and Chloe are my top priority. I'll always make sure you're safe and happy." Chloe piped up, her voice cheerful. "We're happy now, Dad. Right, Liam?" Liam nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah, we are." Their words warmed my heart and strengthened my resolve. I had done the right thing by cutting Vanessa out of our lives, even if it hadn't been easy. Sophia continued to be a source of support and love, not just for me but for Liam and Chloe as well. She had become an integral part of our family and the kids adored her. Chloe would often curl up next to her during movie nights, while Liam loved to show her his soccer moves in the backyard. Watching them bond with her was a joy I hadn't anticipated, and it solidified my belief that we were building something special. One evening, as Sophia and I sat on the couch after the kids had gone to bed, she turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "How are you feeling about everything now?" she asked. "With Vanessa, Derek, the divorce, all of it?" I took a deep breath, considering her question. "Honestly? I feel free," I said. For so long, I was carrying this weight, trying to fix something that was broken beyond repair, trying to hold on to a version of Vanessa that didn't exist anymore. Letting go was hard, but it was the best thing I could have done for myself and the kids. Sophia smiled, resting her head on my shoulder. "I'm proud of you," she said softly. "You've come so far." Her words meant more than she knew. It wasn't just about surviving the betrayal. It was about rebuilding my life and creating a better future for myself and my kids. And with Sophia by my side, I felt like anything was possible. One day, while running errands in town, I unexpectedly ran into Vanessa. She was standing outside a small cafe, her face pale and tired, her once confident demeanor replaced by something fragile and uncertain. She spotted me before I could slip away and her eyes widened. "Daniel," she said, stepping toward me. "Hi, Vanessa," I replied. My tone neutral. "How are you?" She hesitated, her hands fidgeting nervously. "I'm managing," she said. "I heard about Derek." "Everyone has," I said flatly, making no effort to hide my lack of sympathy. She winced but pressed on. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. I know I messed up, and I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed you to hear that." Her apology was unexpected, but it didn't stir the emotions it might have months ago. I felt nothing but a distant, detached pity for her. "I appreciate you saying that," I said simply, "but I've moved on." She nodded, her eyes downcast. "I can see that. You look happy." "I am," I said, and for the first time, I truly meant it. As I walked away, I felt no lingering anger or sadness, only a sense of closure. Vanessa's regret was her burden to carry, and I had no interest in revisiting the past. My life was no longer defined by her choices. It was defined by the future I was building. Back at home, I told Sophia about the encounter. She listened quietly, her hand resting on mine. When I finished, she smiled. "You handled that with grace," she said. "I'm proud of you." Her words stayed with me as I reflected on how far I had come. The man I was now, stronger, wiser, and more confident, was a far cry from the man Vanessa had tried to tear down. I had reclaimed my life and in doing so, I had created something beautiful. That night, as I tucked Liam and Chloe into bed, Chloe looked up at me with her big, bright eyes. "Dad," she said, "do you think everything's going to stay happy like this?" I smiled, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "I think we're just getting started," I said. "The best is yet to come." And as I walked out of their room, I knew it was true. With Sophia by my side and the kids thriving, I was finally living the life I had always dreamed of, a life filled with love, laughter, and endless possibilities. The day I had been working toward finally arrived. A day that symbolized not just a new chapter in my life but the culmination of all the struggles, growth, and victories that had brought me here. It was a bright, crisp morning and I found myself standing in front of the mirror, adjusting the tie on my suit. Today wasn't just another day. Today, Sophia and I were getting married. Liam stood beside me, straightening his little bow tie, his reflection mirroring my proud smile. "You nervous, Dad?" he asked. His voice filled with curiosity. "Not at all," I replied, kneeling down to adjust his tie. "I'm ready. I've never been more sure of anything." His grin widened, and he gave me a quick hug. "I'm happy for you, Dad. And for Sophia. She's the best." Hearing that from Liam meant the world to me. Both he and Chloe had embraced Sophia with open arms, and seeing their bond grow over the past months had been one of the greatest joys of my life. Sophia wasn't just someone I loved. She was someone who had brought light and warmth into our family in a way I hadn't thought possible. The ceremony was held in a picturesque garden, surrounded by friends, family, and the people who had supported us through the hardest times. As I stood at the altar, watching Sophia walk down the aisle, my heart swelled with gratitude. She looked breathtaking, her smile radiant as she approached. Chloe walked beside her, tossing flower petals with giddy excitement, while Liam stood proudly as my best man. When Sophia reached me, she took my hands in hers, her eyes shining with emotion. In that moment, everything else faded away. The pain of the past, the struggles we had endured, it all felt like a distant memory. All that mattered was the future we were building together. The vows were simple but heartfelt, each word carrying the weight of our journey. I promise to stand by you through every challenge and every triumph, I told her. You've shown me what true partnership looks like, and I'm so grateful to walk this path with you. Sophia's voice trembled slightly as she responded, her eyes never leaving mine. You've shown me what strength, resilience, and love truly mean, she said. With you, I found my home. When the ceremony ended and we were pronounced husband and wife, the applause and cheers from our loved ones filled the air. I kissed Sophia, holding her close as Liam and Chloe ran to join us, their laughter ringing out like music. It was a moment I would treasure forever. A moment that symbolized everything I had fought for. The reception was a joyous celebration filled with laughter, dancing, and heartfelt toasts. My sister Samantha stood up to speak. Her voice filled with emotion as she recounted the journey I had been on. Daniel, you've shown all of us what it means to rise above, she said. You've built something truly beautiful, and I couldn't be prouder of the man you've become. Liam and Chloe gave their own short speeches, their words sweet and genuine. We love you, Dad, Liam said, glancing at Sophia with a shy smile. And we love Sophia too. Thanks for making us a family. Tears pricked my eyes as I hugged them both. My heart full of gratitude for the life we were creating. As the evening wore on, I took a quiet moment to step outside and look up at the stars. The garden was illuminated by soft string lights, and the distant sound of music and laughter drifted through the air. Sophia found me there, slipping her hand into mine. Everything okay? She asked, her voice soft. More than okay, I replied, pulling her close. I was just thinking about how far we've come. It feels surreal. She smiled, resting her head on my shoulder. You deserve this, Daniel. Every bit of it. You've worked so hard to build this life and now it's yours. I kissed her forehead, feeling a profound sense of peace. Ours, I corrected. We built this together. As the night came to an end and we said our goodbyes to friends and family, I felt a sense of closure that I hadn't realized I still needed. The journey to this moment hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the struggles, they had all led me here to a life filled with love, trust, and endless possibilities. In the weeks that followed, life settled into a new rhythm. Sophia and I worked together to create a home that was full of warmth and laughter. Liam and Chloe thrived. Their bond with Sophia growing stronger every day. We planned family trips, shared meals, and celebrated the little moments that made life so special. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Sophia turned to me with a smile. What are you thinking about? She asked. Everything, I said. My voice filled with contentment. How far we've come. How lucky I am. She leaned against me, her hand resting on mine. The best is yet to come, she said softly. And I believed her. For the first time in years, I felt truly at peace. My life, once defined by chaos and betrayal, had become a testament to resilience, love, and the power of starting over. With Sophia by my side and my kids thriving, I knew the future was bright. This was the life I had fought for, and it was more than I ever could have imagined.